Tonight, we walk into a garden where the stars once decided when flowers would bloom. We're going to step into a world where the sky was not merely something to look up at, but something to live by. A world where the stars were guides, teachers, and quiet friends. We're going to walk through the astronomer's garden, a place where the rows of growing things were planted not just by the hands of farmers, but by the careful eyes of those who read the heavens. Imagine a place somewhere between waking and dreaming. It is dusk. The sun has just slipped below the horizon, leaving behind a wash of deep amber and rose that softens with every passing minute into the softest violet, and then into the deep, perfect blue of a summer night. The air is warm, carrying with it the smell of dry earth and something green, something alive, and in the distance, low and gentle, the sound of water moving slowly through a narrow stone channel. You are standing at the edge of a garden. It is not a small garden. It stretches out before you in long, deliberate rows, wider than you might expect, bordered on all sides by low walls of pale stone that have been worn smooth by 100 years of wind. At the far end, where the garden opens to the open desert beyond, you can see the silhouette of a single figure moving between the plants, slow and unhurried, pausing here and there, tilting their head as though listening to something very faint. This is the astronomer. But tonight, they are not watching the stars. Tonight, they are walking the garden, checking the soil around a row of grain, pressing their fingers gently into the earth beside a broadleaf plant with silver edges, murmuring something too quiet to hear. This person tends both the sky above and the soil below with the same quiet reverence, the same patient attention, as though both are pages of the same ancient book. And in a way they are, because this garden, these careful rows, these plants, this water channel, exists because of the stars. Every row runs in a particular direction for a reason. Every seed was planted on a day chosen with extraordinary care. The section to your left, where low-growing herbs make a carpet of gray-green, was planted when a certain star appeared on the eastern horizon just before dawn. The taller plants at the far end were put in the ground the morning after the solstice, when the longest day turned and the nights began to grow very slowly, longer again. And the astronomer knows all of this, has known it all their life, and learned it from the person who taught them, who learned it from the person who taught them before that. This knowledge stretches back so far that no one alive can say where it began. It was always there, it seems, in the stars, in the soil. You step into the garden quietly. The stones of the pathway are smooth and cool beneath your feet. And as the first stars begin to appear overhead, faint at first, then clearer, one by one, the way stars always appear, as though the sky is slowly remembering something it forgot, you begin to understand that what this place truly is not a garden at all. It is a conversation between the earth and the sky, and it has been going on for a very, very long time. Further back than this garden, further back than the astronomer who tends it, further back than any one civilization's memory. Let us go back to the beginning of this story, to the time when human beings first realized that the sky was not random, that the lights above them moved in patterns, and that those patterns mattered deeply to the question of whether they would eat or go hungry. It was not always obvious. For the earliest people who walked this earth, those who moved across open grasslands, who followed animals and water, who slept under trees and rose with the light, the sky was wondrous and strange, but not yet a map they knew how to read. They watched it the way you might watch an ocean on a day you've never seen the sea before. Enormous, undeniable, full of motion, but its language was not yet understood. And then, very slowly it was. We believe this understanding began to crystallize around 10,000 years ago, during a period when something profound was changing about the way human beings lived. For the very first time, in several places around the world at roughly the same era, groups of people began to stop moving quite so much. They began to stay in one place long enough to plant things and harvest them. They began to build structures that could last through a winter and still be standing in the spring. They began, for the first time in a long history of our kind, to be farmers. But even before farming, before the first seed was deliberately pressed into cultivated soil, people were watching the sky. There is evidence carved into animal bone, dating back more than 30,000 years, of what archaeologists believe may be records of lunar cycles. These upper Paleolithic engravings, found at sites across Europe, show sequences of marks that some researchers interpret as moon phase tallies. Counts kept by people who noticed the moon's 29-day cycle and thought it important enough to record. These were not farmers. They were people who moved with the herds, who followed the seasonal migration of animals, who gathered plants as they traveled. But the sky was already meaningful to them, already worth recording, already a kind of language they were beginning to learn to read. And the movement of the moon and stars and sun tracked the same seasonal rhythms that governed where the herds would be at any given time of year. The migration was tied to temperature, to the coming of certain plants, to the patterns of weather that the sky announced. So the sky was a calendar even before the calendar was needed for agriculture. It was a navigation tool, a predictive instrument, a way of knowing where you were in the years-long story. And farmers, more than anyone, need to know what the sky is telling them. If you have planted your grain and the rains do not come, you lose everything. If you have waited too long to plant and the frosts arrive before the harvest, you lose everything. The difference between a good year and a terrible one can come down to a matter of days, of knowing when to act, when to wait, when the window of good soil and warm weather is wide open, and when it is about to close. The sky, people discovered, was a kind of calendar, a more reliable one than anything they could build, because it was always there, always turning, always returning to the same configurations at the same time of year. The stars rose and set with a rhythm that proved, over generations of careful watching, to be absolutely dependable. And the sun, the great golden wheel of the sun, moved through its arc across the horizon in a way that could be tracked, marked, predicted. Somewhere in what is now southern England, around 5,000 years ago, people began to haul enormous blocks of stone, some of them weighing more than 20 tons, across miles of rolling downland. They raised these stones into a circle on the flat plain of Salisbury, and they positioned them with a precision that still astonishes modern archaeologists. Because on the morning of the summer solstice, the longest day of the year, The rising sun aligns perfectly with a single outlying stone called the heel stone, and its first light pours like liquid gold into the exact center of the circle. And on the morning of the winter solstice, the shortest day, the beginning of the long, slow return toward warmth, the setting sun aligns with the great trilithon, the paired stones at the monument's heart, framing the last light of the dying day with impossible tenderness and precision. These people, who left no written language behind them, who we know only through the things they built and the traces they left in the soil, understood the sky well enough to build it in stone. They understood the year as a wheel, and they placed their monument at the hub of that wheel so that anyone who stood within the circle could feel themselves at the center of time itself. Research published in the journal Antiquity in 2022 proposed a compelling new interpretation, that the 30 large sarsen stones of Stonehenge's outer circle represented a month of 30 days, that the 5 trilithons at the center corresponded to the 5 intercalary days added to the Egyptian civil year, and that the whole monument encoded a solar calendar of 365 and a quarter days, calibrated by the solstice alignments so that any errors in counting would immediately become visible when the sun no longer lined up correctly on midsummer morning. This interpretation remains debated among archaeologists, as all interpretations of Stonehenge ultimately must. The builders left no explanatory texts, but the precision of the monument's astronomical alignments is not in question. On the morning of the summer solstice and the evening of the winter solstice, the light enters the monument in exactly the way the builders intended every single year, and has done so for nearly 5,000 years. There is something about this that is almost unbearably moving when you let yourself feel it fully. 5,000 years of solstice mornings. 5,000 times the sun has risen in the northeast, and its first light has fallen along the stone avenue and illuminated the heart of the circle. The people who build it are gone beyond all possibility of knowing. Their language, their names, their beliefs, their daily lives, all of it lost. But the conversation they began with the sky is still going on. The light still arrives on schedule. The year still turns. That is not a small thing. That is one of the most extraordinary things our species has ever done. And it was all in service of the most practical of questions. When do we plant? When do we harvest? When does the wheel of the year begin to turn toward warmth again? And when must we prepare for cold? The sky told them. The sky always told them. So there was a moment, and perhaps it happened in more than one place, in more than one culture, around more than one fire under a vast dark sky, when a person looked up at the stars and then looked down at the earth and thought, what if these two things could speak to each other directly? What if the garden itself could be a kind of sky? This is the founding dream of the Astronomer's Garden. Not a dream in the sense of something imaginary or impossible, but a dream in the oldest sense, a vision of how things could be, a long thought carried forward by a single human imagination out toward a horizon of beautiful possibility. Come back now to that quiet garden at dusk. The astronomer is still moving between the rows. The stars are brightening overhead. Let's walk a little further in and look more closely at what has been made here. Notice first the way the rows are aligned. They run precisely east to west, following the path that the sun traces across the sky each day. This is not an accident. The astronomer, or the astronomer's teacher, or the teacher's teacher generations ago, understood that aligning rows east to west gives each plant equal exposure to the light as the sun moves through its arc. The plants on the northern edge of each row receive the same warmth as those on the southern edge, the same light, the same gift. In the center of the garden, at the very heart of it, there's a stone. It is about as tall as a person's waist, perfectly smooth on top, and it is positioned so that at noon on the summer solstice, it casts no shadow at all. At every other time of year, it casts a shadow that can be read like a hand on a clock, telling the hour, the season, the moment in the great yearly turning. This stone is the garden's eye. Around it, the sections of the garden radiate outward like the spokes of a wheel. The section to the east is planted with fast-growing things, herbs and young greens that come up quickly, that belong to the beginning of the year, to the time of first light and new warmth. The section to the south, which catches the most sun through the long summer days, is given over to the plants that need heat, to the grain and the sun-facing flowers, the broad leaves and the heavy seed heads. The section to the west, where the afternoon light gathers long and golden and the temperatures are gentler, is for things that take longer to mature, that need patience, that prefer a slower ripening. And the northern section, which catches the last of the light, belongs to the deep-rooted plants, the things that grow down into the dark earth rather than up toward the sky. Each direction, the astronomer knows, has its own quality of light, its own relationship to the wind, its own place in the year's story. To plant mindfully is to honor those qualities. To put the right plant in the right place is to work with the earth rather than against it. And this is where the garden becomes something more than a garden. Each section is also connected to a part of the sky. The east is associated with a morning star, with Venus as she appears before the dawn, cold and brilliant and full of anticipation. The south belongs to the sun in its full strength, the blazing noon of midsummer. The west is the realm of the setting sun, of endings and slow completion. And the north is the home of the circumpolar stars, those stars that never set, that turn around the pole of the sky in their slow, eternal wheel, Polaris at the center, steady as a heartbeat. The garden and the sky are one thing, one conversation, one map, one living document of the relationship between the turning heavens and the patient, generous earth. There is an ancient word for this kind of place, a place where the sky and the earth are in formal, intentional dialogue. The archaeoastronomers call such places sacred landscapes. Not sacred in a religious sense necessarily, though often in that sense too, but sacred in the sense of set apart, of dedicated. A place that has been made into a special kind of listening post, an antenna pointed at the cosmos. Stonehenge is such a place. The temples of Karnak and Abu Simbel in Egypt are such places. The pyramid of Kukulkan at Chichen Itza is such a place. And the astronomer's garden, humble and green and breathing in the evening air, is such a place. Each of these places was made by people who understood that you have to prepare a space in order to hear what the sky is saying. You cannot hear it while distracted, while hurrying, while caught up in the noise and urgency of ordinary life. You have to make room for it. You have to create conditions of quietness and attention and openness. And the best way to create those conditions is to make a place that embodies them, a place whose very structure says, "Here we listen." Let's walk more slowly now. The air is getting cooler. The stars are fully out. Here in the southern section of the garden, where the long summer days pour their heat and brilliance most generously, is where the grain grows. Stand here for a moment and look at it. In this imagined season, it is late summer, and the grain is tall, taller than your knee, each stalk topped with a heavy head of seed that nods very slightly in the warm evening air. The color of it in the last of the daylight is extraordinary, a deep, burnished gold that seems almost to glow from within, as though the stalks have spent so many months gathering sunlight that they have finally become light themselves. This is what the sun does. This is photosynthesis, a word that comes from the Greek for light and putting together. Every leaf is a tiny workshop taking the light that falls on it, pulling carbon dioxide from the air, drawing water up through the roots from the soil below, and from these three simple ingredients, light, air, and water, assembling the sugar that feeds the plant. It is, when you stop and think about it, one of the most miraculous processes in the natural world. Life built from light. The ancient people who planted grain did not know the word photosynthesis, but they understood, in the most profound and practical way possible, that sunlight was the source of all growth. They watched the way plants in full sun grew taller and stronger than those in the shade. They observed how a south-facing slope warmed earlier in the spring, and how the grain planted there came up first. They noticed that the longest days of summer, those blazing weeks around the solstice when the sun seemed to hang in the sky for an impossibly long time, produced the most vigorous growth. And they watched something else, too. Something that would not be given a name until much later, but which they could see with perfect clarity. Some plants follow the sun. You may have seen this in a field of sunflowers. In the morning, when the sun rises in the east, the heads of young sunflowers face east. By noon, they are pointing straight up. By late afternoon, they have swung to the west, following the arc of the sun across the sky with a slow devotion that is almost tender to watch. This movement is called heliotropism, from the Greek for sun and turning, and it was one of the great wonders of the plant world to those who noticed it first. Imagine the astronomer noticing this for the first time as a child. Perhaps they were walking through a field at dawn and saw the heads of the young plants all turn toward the same point on the horizon, all oriented toward the rising sun with a unanimity that felt almost intentional. Perhaps they ran back to their teacher and breathlessly reported, "The flowers are watching the sun." And perhaps the teacher smiled and said, "Yes, they have always done this. They are not so different from us. The sun governs more than just the moment-to-moment growth of plants. It governs the rhythm of the entire growing year through day length, something the ancients understood intuitively long before anyone gave it the name photoperiodism. Plants are extraordinarily sensitive to how many hours of light they receive each day. Some plants, like onions and spinach, only produce their flowers and seeds when the days grow long. Other plants, like chrysanthemums and poinsettias, bloom only when the nights become long and the days short. The seasons determine not just the temperature, but the very timing of a plant's life, when it will flower, when it will seed, when it will rest. The ancients who tracked the solstices, the midsummer peak and the midwinter low, were tracking these tipping points. The solstices are the moments when the day length changes direction, when a year begins its tilt toward longer nights or longer days. For a farmer, knowing exactly when those moments arrive is as important as knowing the weather. The solstice is a signal in the deepest possible sense. It tells you where you are in the year's turning, and it tells you what the plants are about to do next. In the Astronomer's garden, the grain in the southern section is the sun's most direct gift. It is the plant that best embodies the extraordinary collaboration between light and life. This heavy, golden, nodding head of seeds that will feed people through the winter, that was assembled from nothing but light and air and water, that carries within each tiny grain the compressed energy of a summer's worth of sun. The astronomer runs a hand gently through the tops of the stalks as they pass. The seeds rattle softly, a quiet, dry music. The sky darkens further. More stars appear. On the northern edge of the garden, where the shadows gather earliest in the evening and where the light of the setting sun does not quite reach, there is a section unlike any other. The plants here are different. Many of them are low-growing, silver-leaved, hugging the ground as though they belong more to the earth than to the sky. Some of them have flowers, white flowers, pale flowers, flowers that in daylight seem almost bleached, but their true beauty only becomes visible at night, when the light of a full moon turns them luminous, transforms them into something that seems to generate its own quiet glow. Night blooming jasmine, white evening primrose, moonflowers that unfurl their petals only after dark, releasing a sweetness into the cool air that is almost too much to bear. This is the moon garden, and it was planted with deliberate, careful attention to something that human beings have observed for thousands of years. The moon is not merely a light in the night sky. It is a force. You know this at the beach. The tides rise and fall in perfect synchrony with the moon's cycle, pulled by gravity in a rhythm as reliable as breathing. The full moon brings the highest tides, when the combined pull of the moon and the sun working together lifts the ocean toward the sky. The new moon, when the moon aligns with the sun, does the same. In between, during the quarter moons, the tides are lower, the pull divided. The ocean breathes in and out with the moon's 29.5-day cycle, and has done so since the ocean existed. The question that ancient farmers asked, the question that became one of the oldest traditions in agriculture around the world, was whether the moon's pull affected not just the ocean, but the water within the earth and within the plants. The water table in the soil moves, and it moves in part with the moon's gravitational rhythm. Subtle, slower, less dramatic than the ocean tides, but real. The idea that seeds germinating in the first days after a new moon are drawing on a moment of heightened moisture in the soil, a moment when the water has been gently lifted toward the surface by the lunar pull. This is an idea that has been held independently in ancient Egypt, in Babylon, in Rome, in China, in the Americas, and across the cultures of the Pacific. Pliny the Elder, the great Roman natural philosopher who wrote his encyclopedic work on nature in the 1st century AD, wrote extensively about the moon's influence on farming. He observed that timber should be cut during the waning moon, when the sap had settled downward into the roots, so that the wood would be drier and more durable. He noted that the Celts harvested mistletoe on the 5th day of the new moon, timing their sacred harvest to a precise phase of the lunar cycle. Roman gardeners planted their seeds by the waxing moon from new to full, when the light was increasing night by night and the soil moisture was believed to be rising. The Babylonians and Assyrians are believed to have been among the first to formalize this practice, observing the moon's cycles and their effects on plant growth with a methodical attention they brought to everything celestial. The ancient Egyptians followed the moon's phases alongside the sun's, maintaining 2 parallel calendars, one solar, one lunar, and consulting both when making agricultural decisions. Native American peoples across the continent timed their planting of corn, beans, and squash to the lunar cycle, passing this knowledge down through generations with the same careful precision that they passed down stories. Benjamin Franklin included a lunar planting calendar in Poor Richard's Almanac in the 18th century, a tradition that continued in the Farmer's Almanac and that some growers follow to this day. Now, to be fair, and the astronomer would want you to know this because they value truth as much as they value beauty, the scientific evidence for direct lunar influence on plant growth is not fully settled. A careful review of research published in the journal Agronomy found no consistent relationship that definitively supports a lunar influence on plant life in every circumstance. Some studies show interesting results, others show none. The science is still unfolding, as science often does when it touches on something so old and subtle. But here is what is undeniably true. The moon affects gravity, which shapes root orientation. The moon affects tides and groundwater. The moon provides light, real, measurable light on a clear full moon night. And there are plants that are genuinely responsive to this light, that use the presence or absence of moonlight as a signal in ways researchers are only beginning to understand. A species called Ephedra fominea, a plant of the eastern Mediterranean, was observed to release pollen specifically timed to the full moon, attracting nocturnal pollinators who could navigate by its light. These moths and beetles, moving through the silver garden under the full moon, are both real and beautiful. And beyond the science, there is the fact that timing and attention are never wasted in a garden. The ancient farmer who plants by the moon is also, in the act of following the lunar calendar, paying close attention to the time of year, to the temperature of the soil, to the rhythms of the season. That attention itself is a form of care. In the moon garden, the astronomer pauses beside a white evening primrose, its petals just beginning to unfurl as the darkness deepens. The flower opens slowly over the course of several minutes, as though waking from sleep, as though answering something in the night air. Watch it carefully. One moment the bud is tightly furled, a neat package of pale green with just the faintest suggestion of white at the top. Then, in the space of a breath or two, the petals begin to separate. They curl back slowly, the way a hand opens when it is relaxed in sleep, each petal moving at its own pace, the whole flower opening outward in a gesture of extraordinary delicacy and completeness. By the time the stars are fully visible overhead, the flower is open entirely, wide as a small face turned upward toward the dark sky, releasing its fragrance into the still night air. This is what the moon garden is for. Not just the observation of it, but the experience of it. The way the night transforms the garden into something that the day version of the same space cannot be. The white flowers that seem faded and ordinary in harsh sunlight become luminous at night. The silver leaves of the artemisia and the lavender catch whatever faint light there is, moonlight, starlight, the diffuse luminosity of a clear sky, and they seem to hold it to softly broadcast it back. The ancient peoples who cultivated moon gardens were paying attention to something real, the way moonlight changes the visible world. A full moon on a clear night can cast shadows. It is bright enough to read by on a good night if the text is large enough. It is certainly bright enough to work by in a garden, and for creatures with eyes adapted to lower light levels. Moths, beetles, owls, foxes. A full moon transforms the night into a world of extraordinary visibility and activity. The ancient Babylonians and Assyrians are believed to have originated the formal practice of lunar gardening, observing the moon cycles over many generations and correlating them with plant behavior in ways systematic enough to become doctrine. From Mesopotamia, the practice spread westward to Greece and Rome, where Pliny the Elder wrote about it in his Natural History, and eastward to India and eventually China. It arrived in the Americas independently through the indigenous agricultural traditions of peoples who, separated by an ocean from the Old World astronomers, had arrived at similar practices through their own long generations of sky watching and cultivation. The astronomer watches the open primrose for a while without moving. The sky above is extraordinary now. The Milky Way, a faint river of light pouring from one horizon to the other. The moon, in its first quarter, sits low in the west, its crescent casting just enough light to make the pale flowers of the moon garden glow. Let us pause in the center of the garden, beside the shadow stone, and look up. There are certain lights in the sky that are not like the others. Most stars, if you watch them night after night over weeks and months, move in a great wheeling pattern, always in the same configuration relative to each other, always rising and setting in the same arc, always returning to the same position in the same season. The ancient people called them the fixed stars, and the word fixed meant exactly what it suggests. They stay put relative to one another, turning together like a great wheel around the pole. But 5 of the lights in the night sky do not behave this way. 5 of them wander. Night after night, week after week, these lights move against the background of the fixed stars. Sometimes slowly, sometimes quickly, sometimes, most puzzling of all, appearing to stop and move backward for a while before reversing direction again and continuing forward. They trace their complicated, looping, wandering paths through the sky with a deliberateness that seems almost intentional, almost personality-driven. The ancient Greek word for this kind of wandering light was planets, the wanderers, and from that word comes our word, planet. The 5 planets visible to the naked eye, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, were watched by ancient cultures with particular intensity, not just as celestial curiosities, but as voices, as personalities, as gods who move through the heavens on their own mysterious business, and whose movements could be read for meaning about the world below. In the great civilization of Babylon, in the land between the rivers Tigris and Euphrates, in what is now Iraq, some of the most sophisticated stargazers in the ancient world developed a system of planetary observation that would eventually become the foundation for all Western astronomy and astrology. The Babylonian pre-scholars, who were at once scientists, priests, and advisors to kings, kept systematic astronomical diaries beginning around the 8th century BC, recording with meticulous precision the positions, phases, and appearances of every planet they could observe. They assigned to each planet a divine identity. Jupiter, the largest and most brilliant, was the great god Marduk, patron of Babylon itself, the planet of kings, of power, of divine authority. Venus, the most beautiful, was Ishtar, goddess of love and war. And Venus appears both as the morning star, rising before the sun, and as the evening star, setting after it, which made her even more remarkable, a deity with 2 faces. Saturn was Ninurta, a god of agriculture and the harvest. Mars was Nergal, associated with the underworld, with war, with the red heat of summer. Mercury was Nabu, the scribe god, the keeper of knowledge. When Venus passed through a particular constellation, the Babylonian astronomers read this as a message from Ishtar about the fortunes of the harvest. When Mars aligned with a certain star, they consulted their records of what had happened the last time this alignment occurred, and they advised accordingly. The crop predictions, the timing of battles, the sowing of grain, all of these were understood to exist in relationship with the movements of the wandering lights. The Babylonians developed star catalogs of extraordinary detail and precision. The Mul.Appin, a collection of cuneiform tablets whose name translates roughly as plow star, named for the leading constellation, contains catalogs of stars and constellations, schemes for predicting the heliacal risings and settings of planets, and calculations for the length of daylight at different times of year. It also contains rules for intercalating the calendar, for predicting eclipses, and for reading weather omens from the behavior of celestial bodies. This single document, compiled sometime in the first millennium BC, but clearly drawing on centuries of earlier observation, is essentially a complete manual for the relationship between the sky and the agricultural year. The oldest surviving planetary astronomical text in the world is the Babylonian Venus tablet of Ammisaduqa, a record of observations of the planet Venus over a period of 21 years, tracking its appearances as the morning star and evening star, its periods of invisibility, and the intervals between these events. In the Astronomer's Garden, there are sections given over to each of the 5 planets. The section devoted to Mars, god of fire and action, is planted with red stem plants, with peppers and sorrel, with plants that have a bite, a heat, an urgency. The section for Venus is a small, enclosed space filled with fragrant herbs and flowering things, with roses and lavender, with the plants of beauty and sweetness. Jupiter's section is broad and generous, planted with the largest crops, the ones that take up the most space and give back the most nourishment. Saturn's section contains the deep-rooted, slow-growing things, the plants that ask for patience, that take a full year or more to complete their cycle. And Mercury's section is small, but full of surprises, quick-growing herbs, things that respond rapidly to care, plants that seem almost to think. These associations were not arbitrary, even from a practical standpoint. The movement of Venus through the sky reliably tracked certain seasons. The position of Mars corresponded to temperature patterns that ancient observers had correlated over generations of record-keeping with particular agricultural conditions. The sky was being used as a data system, and these wandering planets were its most dynamic, most information-rich components. The astronomer moves through the Venus section, trailing their fingers along the lavender, and the released scent is immediate and extraordinary in the cooling night air. Now let us walk to the eastern end of the garden, where the ground rises slightly and where the planting is arranged in a pattern that from above might look almost random. Clusters here, sweeping rows there, open spaces in unexpected places. But is not random at all. Each cluster corresponds to a constellation. Each arrangement of plants echoes the arrangement of stars that governs a particular time of year. This practice of watching the sky for the appearance of certain star groupings and using them as signals to plant is one of the oldest and most universal agricultural tools in human history, because constellations are extraordinarily reliable. The same star group that appears on the eastern horizon at dawn in late spring will appear there again next year, and the year after, and the year after that, with clockwork precision. You do not need a calendar. You do not need to count days. You look at the sky, and the sky tells you where you are in the year. The Pleiades, that soft cluster of stars that looks to the naked eye like a small smear of light, but resolves, in darkness or with even a modest magnification, into a tight group of brilliant young blue stars. This was perhaps the most important agricultural constellation in the ancient world. Ancient Greek farmers, following the guidance of the poet Hesiod writing around 750 BC, watched for the Pleiades to rise just before the sun at dawn in late spring as the signal to begin their harvest. When the Pleiades rose heliacally, meaning when they first became visible on the eastern horizon just before sunrise after a period of invisibility, it meant that the sailing season was open and that grain must be cut. When the Pleiades set, disappearing below the horizon just before dawn in autumn, it was time to plow and sow the winter wheat. The Maori people of New Zealand, who were separated from ancient Greece by half a world and an ocean, called the Pleiades Matariki, and their heliacal rising marks the beginning of the new year in their traditional calendar. It is a sign of the coming planting season, a call to return to the garden, a moment of reunion between the earth and the sky. The constellation Orion, with his distinctive three-star belt, was associated in ancient Egypt with the god Osiris, a god of the dead, yes, but also, and perhaps more essentially, a god of resurrection and the grain. Orion rose above the horizon at a particular time of year that correlated in ancient Egypt with the planting season, and when his constellation appeared in the pre-dawn sky, it was understood as a signal from Osiris himself. The earth is ready. It is time to put the seeds in. The Babylonian constellation that we now call Virgo was known to them as AB.Sin, which can be translated as seed furrow. The constellation of the seed furrow rose on the eastern horizon in early autumn in ancient Mesopotamia, precisely at the time of seed sowing. It depicted a celestial woman holding a stalk of barley, and the movement of the sun, moon, and planets through her region of the sky was watched carefully for omens about whether the crop would succeed or fail. These are not coincidences. They are the result of generations of careful sky watching, of farmers and astronomer priests correlating what they saw overhead with what was happening in the fields, building up over centuries a body of knowledge so detailed and reliable that it could replace a written calendar. The ancient Chinese astronomical tradition, which many historians consider among the most precise and systematic in the world up until around 1200 AD, used a system of 28 lunar mansions, divisions of the sky based on the constellations the moon passed through during its monthly journey. These lunar mansions serve as a kind of celestial address system, allowing astronomers to specify the exact position of any celestial body on any given night, and farmers and astrologers to track the correspondence between the moon's position in these mansions and the best times for planting, harvesting, cutting timber, and beginning journeys. The Chinese government understood the power of this calendrical knowledge so well that it kept astronomical data under tight bureaucratic control. Knowing when to plant and how to manage irrigation was literally political power. In India, the Vedic tradition developed the nakshatra system, also 27 or 28 lunar mansions, as both a religious and agricultural calendar. The correspondence between the moon's passage through specific nakshatras and the timing of the monsoon rains was a matter of survival for millions of farmers across the subcontinent. When a moon was in certain nakshatras, rain was expected. When it was in others, drought was more likely. These correlations were built up over centuries of observation by Vedic astronomers who watched the sky with the same patient attention they brought to the study of sacred texts. In the astronomer's garden, the constellation clusters are arranged so that at different times of year, different sections of the garden are most active, most alive with growth, most in need of attention. In early spring, when Orion is fading from the evening sky and a new set of stars is rising, the eastern section wakes up. In midsummer, when the sky burns with Leo and Scorpius and the great southern constellations, the heart of the garden is at its peak. In autumn, when the Pleiades settle into their harvest position and Virgo, the seed furrow, returns to the pre-dawn sky, the western section begins to ripen. The garden is a mirror of the sky. Walk through it at any time of year, and you will know by looking at which plants are flowering, which are heavy with fruit, which are being harvested, and which are being planted exactly where you are in the great turning wheel of the year. The astronomer pauses in the middle of a cluster of plants that echoes the Pleiades, pressing their ear close to the rustling leaves, as though listening to something the plants know that they do not. The night deepens. The dew is beginning to form. In the astronomer's small stone shelter at the edge of the garden, there is a table covered in marks. Not a table in the way we would think of one, necessarily. It might be a flat stone, or a piece of smoothed wood, or simply a broad clay tablet. But on it, scratched and pressed and inked over years of patient observation, is a record of everything the astronomer has noticed about the relationship between the sky and the garden. Here, the date of the first frost in the third year of their timekeeping, and which plant survived it and which did not. Here, the exact day the grain flowered in the high heat summer 7 years ago, and what the sky looked like, which stars were rising where the moon was in its cycle. Here, a note about the year when the rains came late, when a usually reliable signal of a certain star's appearance was followed by a dry month instead of a wet one, and what happened to the crops as a result. This is not just a garden diary. It is a kind of science, an attempt to find the underlying patterns in the relationship between the heavens and the earth, to test observations against reality, to build up over time a knowledge that is not just traditional but evidence-based. The great civilizations of the ancient world all developed calendars, and without exception, those calendars grew out of the twin necessities of watching the sky and growing food. The Babylonians maintained what scholars now call astronomical diaries, systematic records of celestial observations that continued for at least 500 years, from roughly the 6th century BC to the 1st century AD. These clay tablets, inscribed with the Babylonian cuneiform script, recorded the positions of the moon and planets night by night, noted weather conditions, recorded market prices for grain and dates and wool, and described significant political events. The sky and the economy and the harvest were all entries in the same document, because they were understood to be part of the same system. The Babylonians also grappled with one of the fundamental problems of calendar keeping. The sun and the moon do not cooperate. A lunar month, the time it takes the moon to complete one full cycle from new moon to new moon, is 29.5 days. 12 of these lunar months add up to about 354 days. But the solar year, the time it takes the Earth to complete one orbit around the sun, is 365.25 days. That means the lunar calendar and the solar calendar fall progressively out of step, drifting apart by about 11 days per year. If you follow the lunar calendar strictly, without adjustment, you will find that after about 16 years, the seasons have drifted entirely out of their expected relationship with the month names. What you called the harvest month will now fall in spring. The planting season will be in what was once winter. Everything is confused. The solution, which the Babylonians worked out with great mathematical sophistication, was to periodically add an extra month, a 13th month, to bring the two calendars back into alignment. They called this intercalation, and they spent centuries working out the precise mathematical rule for when to do it. The result, after generations of astronomical observation and calculation, was a lunisolar calendar that stayed synchronized with the seasons with impressive accuracy. The Egyptians took a different approach. Their civil calendar was purely solar, 365 days, 12 months of 30 days each, plus 5 extra days at the end of the year that were treated as the birthdays of the gods. This calendar was anchored to the heliacal rising of Sirius, which marked the new year, and its great advantage was its absolute regularity. Every year was exactly the same length. Every month was exactly 30 days. You could calculate any date in the future or past with simple arithmetic. The disadvantage was that a year of 365 days is not quite long enough. The true solar year is 365 and a quarter days, which means the Egyptian calendar drifted one full day from the true solar year every 4 years. Over time, the carefully calibrated alignment between the civil calendar and the heliacal rising of Sirius drifted. In fact, the period over which the civil calendar drifted entirely away from and then back to the heliacal rising of Sirius was 1,460 years, a period the Greeks called the Sothic cycle. Egyptian priests kept careful track of this drift, noting in their records how many days separated the current civil new year from the astronomical new year marked by Sirius, essentially maintaining a correction factor that allowed them to know where they truly were in the solar year regardless of what the official calendar said. Julius Caesar, after spending time in Egypt in the 1st century BC and consulting with Egyptian astronomers, brought this knowledge back to Rome. The result was the Julian calendar, a reformed Roman calendar that incorporated a leap year every 4 years, bringing the calendar into close alignment with the true solar year. This was one of the most practically important acts of cultural exchange in the ancient world, and it came directly from Egypt's millennia of sky watching and record keeping. And here, engraved in the stone at the heart of the Astronomer's Garden, is a simplified version of this same problem. The shadow stone does not tell you the month. It does not divide time into weeks or seasons. What it does is give you 2 absolute reference points: the precise moments of the solstice, when its shadow falls in one exact direction at noon. From those 2 reference points, you can count, you can measure, you can build a calendar that holds. The astronomer walks to the shadow stone and stands beside it, looking up at the stars. Somewhere above, a meteor traces a brief bright arc and vanishes. The astronomer watches the place where it disappeared for a moment, then looks back down at the garden. Sometimes on a still night like this, they can hear the plants. Not literally hear them. Not in the way you hear wind or water, but there's a quality of presence to a garden at night, a sense of aliveness, of 10,000 small processes proceeding in the dark. The respiration of the leaves, the slow movement of water up through the roots, the cellular work of 1,000 living things, the chemistry of growth conducted in silence and darkness, patient and unhurried and entirely indifferent to observation. This is what the astronomer loves most about the night garden. Its unself-consciousness. In the daylight, the garden seems aware of being looked at. The flowers face the sun. The leaves orient toward the light. Everything is reaching, striving, displaying. But at night, When the sun is gone and the light is only the soft ambient glow of the stars, the garden seems to settle into itself, to breathe, to be simply and completely without performance. The marks on the tablet inside know this garden better than any single person could. The garden is older than the astronomer. It will be here after them. It is a living record, growing and dying and growing again, of everything the sky has said to the earth across a span of lifetimes. Not all of the sky's language is written in stars and planets and the arc of the sun. Some of it is written in clouds. The astronomer knows this section of sky reading, too. It is less precise than the tracking of constellations, less mathematical than the prediction of solstices, but it is no less important, and in some ways it is the most immediately practical knowledge they possess. Because all the careful timing in the world will not save a crop if the rain does not come, or comes at the wrong moment, or comes in such excess that it drowns what it ought to nourish. Reading the weather from the sky is one of the oldest human skills. The ancient Greeks and Romans compiled extensive observations about the relationship between celestial events and weather patterns. Pliny the Elder devoted entire chapters of his natural history to weather prediction, and many of these observations are based on real atmospheric phenomena. A ring around the moon on a clear night, that soft halo that appears when thin cirrus clouds of ice crystals catch the moonlight, is a genuine indicator that a weather system may be moving in within the next day or two. The old saying, "Ring around the moon, rain coming soon," has meteorological basis. The Babylonian astronomical diaries that recorded planetary positions also recorded weather, because the two were understood to be part of the same observable system. When certain star configurations aligned with particular weather patterns reliably, year after year over decades of records, this correlation could be used to anticipate what might come. The ancient Indians developed the science of predicting monsoons by observing the nakshatra, the position of the moon against certain star groupings, and correlating these positions with the onset of the annual rains that determined whether the great rice harvest of the subcontinent would be bountiful or disastrous. The nakshatra calendar was, among its many functions, a monsoon calendar, a guide for when to plant and when to wait. The Egyptians, who depended on a single catastrophic seasonal flood rather than regular rainfall, solved this problem differently. They watched one star, just one, and everything else followed from that. The star was Sirius. Sirius is the brightest star in the entire night sky. On any clear night, anywhere in the world, it blazes above all others with a cold blue-white light that seems almost too intense to be natural. The ancient Egyptians called it Sopdet. They gave it the form of a goddess, a woman crowned with a five-pointed star, and they worshipped her with a reverence appropriate to a deity who gave them their entire agricultural world. Because once a year, after a period of roughly 70 days when Sirius had been invisible, lost in the glare of the sun, hidden during the long summer days, it would reappear, just before dawn, a pinprick of brilliant light on the eastern horizon, seen for only a moment before the sun rose and overwhelmed it. This first reappearance is called the heliacal rising, from the Greek word for the sun, because it happens in the light of the rising sun. And in ancient Egypt, around 5,000 years ago, this heliacal rising of Sirius in early summer coincided with astonishing reliability with the beginning of the annual Nile flood. Every year, the Nile flooded. It flooded because of rains that fell far to the south in the Ethiopian highlands, rains that filled the Blue Nile and the other tributaries and sent a wave of brown, silt-laden water rolling north across the dry desert of Egypt. The flood rose up to 46 feet in some places, spreading across the floodplain, depositing a layer of rich, dark, extraordinarily fertile soil over everything it touched. Without this flood, there was no agriculture. With it, the land was extraordinarily productive. Egypt could grow grain enough to feed itself and to export across the ancient Mediterranean world. The Nile flood was quite literally the source of Egyptian civilization, and Sirius announced it. When the priests and astronomers watching the eastern horizon in the pre-dawn darkness of early July saw the first flash of Sirius, that single brilliant heartbeat of light before the sun rose and swallowed it, they knew the flood was coming. Within weeks, the river would begin to rise. There was time to move animals and belongings to higher ground, time to prepare for the great annual transformation of the land. The Egyptians built their entire year around this moment. Their new year began with the heliacal rising of Sirius. Their calendar of 3 seasons, flood season, growing season, and harvest season, was anchored to it. Their goddess Sopdet stood at the threshold of time, and every year she opened the door. In the Astronomer's garden, there is a small pool at the northern edge, a stone-lined basin fed by the slow channel that runs from the hill above. On the morning of the heliacal rising of Sirius, whenever that morning comes, varying slightly year by year, the astronomer comes to stand at the edge of this pool before dawn and watches the eastern sky. When Sirius appears, reflected in the still water of the pool, the astronomer dips their hand into the water and says something very quiet to the garden. An acknowledgement, a greeting. Then the planting season truly begins. At the 4 cardinal points of the garden, at the exact east, west, north, and south, stand 4 trees. They were planted long ago, before the current astronomer was born. They are large now, their roots deep in the earth, their canopies wide enough to cast generous shade in the summer heat. Each one was chosen carefully, planted deliberately, at a point in the garden that corresponds to one of the 4 directions, one of the 4 turning points of the year. The tree in the east, planted at the point where the sun rises on the equinoxes, those 2 days each year when day and night are exactly equal in length, is an almond tree. It was chosen because almond trees bloom before almost any other tree in the year, putting out their white and pale pink flowers when the air is still cold and winter has not fully let go. The almond blossom is a statement of faith. I believe the warmth is coming. I will open my flowers before I can be certain. The tree in the south, planted at the point of maximum sun, is a fig year. Figs are among the most ancient cultivated plants in human history. There is archaeological evidence of their cultivation in the Middle East going back at least 11,000 years, making them one of the first plants that human beings deliberately grew rather than simply gathered. A ripe fig, is the taste of deep summer, of heat and sweetness and abundance. In the garden, the fig tree stands as the embodiment of the summer solstice, the moment of maximum light and warmth. The tree in the west, at the point of the setting sun, is an apple. Not by chance. The apple has been associated across many cultures with completion, with harvest, with the fulfillment of long growth. The apple ripens in autumn, in the last warmth of the year, heavy and red, and harvesting apples is one of the most satisfying of all garden acts, the culmination of a full year's patience. Planted at the western point, where the sun sets, the apple tree is the garden's emblem of endings that are also beginnings, of completion that contains within it the promise of the following year. And in the north, at the point that aligns with the circumpolar stars, those eternal wanderers of the northern sky, there is an oak. The oak is the oldest of the four trees. It may have been planted by the astronomer's grandparent or their grandparent's grandparent. It is so large now that in the daytime it casts a shadow the length of 3 people lying head to foot, and at night its canopy darkens a wide patch of sky that always contains the North Star. The North Star, or Polaris, is not the brightest star in the sky. Sirius outshines it many times over. But Polaris has a quality that makes it uniquely precious to anyone who needs to navigate or to orient a garden. It barely moves. As the Earth rotates through the night, every other star traces an arc across the sky, rising in the east, crossing overhead or near it, setting in the west. But Polaris sits almost exactly above the Earth's North Pole, and it stays like a fixed nail in the turning wheel of the sky, within less than a degree of true north throughout the entire night and throughout the entire year. The ancient peoples of the Northern Hemisphere used Polaris to orient their structures and their fields. The great stone circles of prehistoric Britain were often aligned with cardinal directions. The Egyptian pyramids were aligned with extraordinary precision to true north. The Great Pyramid of Khufu deviates from true north by less than a fraction of a degree, using the circumpolar stars as guides. The northern point of the garden is anchored to this same reliable, immortal point in the sky. And the oak stands there, its massive roots in the dark northern soil, its crown spread wide under the stars, as if it is itself a kind of compass, rooted to the axis of the world. There is something the astronomer knows that many people do not think about. A great deal of the best work in the garden is done at night. Not the planting, usually though sometimes, and not the watering, at least not from channels that flow only in the day. But harvesting, yes. And the reason is practical, rooted in the most fundamental biology of plants. When you harvest a plant in the heat of the day, it is under stress. Its leaves are transpiring, losing water to the air, and the cells of its fruit or leaves are actively working, digesting, converting. If you cut a plant when it is in this state of active daylight metabolism, the harvested material begins to deteriorate quickly. The heat accelerates the process. But harvest in the cool of the night or the early pre-dawn hours when the plant has been resting in the dark, when its cells are full of water absorbed through the roots, when the temperature is at its lowest and the stress of the sun has been absent for hours, and you harvest something that is noticeably different in quality. It holds better. It stays fresh longer. In the days before refrigeration, this was not a small matter. This was the difference between food that lasted the journey to market and food that did not. The astronomer knows this. So when the harvest season comes, they light their lanterns, clay lamps burning oil, their small flames warm and amber in the darkness, and they move through the garden in the last hours of night, cutting grain and gathering fruit and pulling roots from the cool soil while the sky still blazes above them with its undiminished brilliance. There is something deeply right about this, about working in the dark garden by lantern light while the stars and the moon make the silver-leaved plants of the moon garden glow. The boundary between the sky world and the earth world feels thinner at these hours. The astronomer feels, as they harvest, that they are part of something very large. The astronomer speaks as they write, telling the story of the garden. When each section was planted, what the sky looked like on each significant day, what the shadow stone showed at solstice, what the water in the channel told them about the coming season. This young person is learning, and what they're learning is not something you can find in a single book, because no single book contains it. What they're learning is a practice, a way of paying attention, an orientation of the whole body, eyes toward the sky, hands in the soil, heart patient, mind recording, that was developed over more generations than either of them can count. The ancient Greeks called this kind of accumulated, practice-based knowledge technique the art of doing something well through long experience. It is different from episteme, the theoretical knowledge that can be written down and reasoned about. Technique lives in the body. It lives in the hands and eyes of someone who has done a thing many times, who has failed and adjusted, who has developed a feel for the work that is not fully translatable into words. Oral traditions, the passing of knowledge through story, demonstration, and practice, were the primary means by which agricultural knowledge moved through time in the ancient world. The Babylonian astronomical records were written on clay tablets, yes, but the knowledge of how to use those records, how to interpret them, how to apply them to the practical decisions of the farm. That knowledge was passed from teacher to student, from elder to apprentice, by working together, by watching and doing. When we think of ancient knowledge transmission, we tend to imagine that anything not written down was fragile and easily lost. But oral traditions can be extraordinarily durable. The astronomical knowledge embedded in indigenous cultures around the world. In the Aboriginal Australian traditions of following song lines that encoded seasonal and geographic knowledge. In the Polynesian navigation traditions that allowed sailors to travel thousands of miles across the open Pacific by reading stars, waves, and wind, was preserved with remarkable fidelity across hundreds of generations without writing. The Aboriginal Australians developed what researchers now recognize as one of the oldest continuously maintained astronomical traditions in the world, with records suggesting that certain sky stories encode events, including the impact of meteorites and changes in sea level, that may be up to 10,000 years old. Their knowledge of the sky was embedded in narrative, in ceremony, in the patterns of the song lines that mapped not just the landscape, but the relationship between specific places on the Earth and specific points in the sky. This is not metaphor. These traditions genuinely contain navigational and seasonal information that has been tested against physical evidence and found accurate. The early science methods that eventually became what we now call the scientific method grew directly from this ancient practice of recording observations over time and looking for patterns. When the Babylonians kept their astronomical diaries, correlating planetary positions with crop yields and weather patterns over 5 centuries, they were doing something that in structure, if not in language, closely resembles a modern longitudinal scientific study. They had a consistent methodology, a persistent interest in correlation, and a willingness to record data that contradicted their predictions as well as data that confirmed them. The young person by the fire asks, "What is the most important thing to remember about the garden?" The astronomer finishes writing a line on the tablet, taps it thoughtfully, and says that it is not yours. It was here before you. It will be here after you. Your job is not to master it, but to tend it, and to listen to it, and to pass on what you have learned to the next person who will tend it after you. The young person thinks about this for a while. The fire crackles quietly. Outside, the stars are wheeling overhead. The garden is dark and still, breathing in the cool night air. There is one more thing the astronomer knows, a thing that takes more than a single lifetime to understand, a thing that only reveals itself through the accumulated records of many generations of careful sky watchers. The sky changes, not quickly, not visibly from one year to the next, but over centuries, over millennia. The positions of the stars relative to the seasons drift. The star that rose exactly at the summer solstice in one era is no longer rising at the summer solstice 1,000 years later. The constellation that was the signal for spring planting in ancient Babylon is now the signal for a slightly different season. This drift has a name: precession of the equinoxes. It happens because the Earth does not spin with perfect stability. Its axis wobbles very slowly, like a top that is beginning to slow down, describing a great circle in the sky over a period of roughly 26,000 years. This wobble means that the point on the sky where the sun sits at the spring equinox moves gradually westward through the constellations, completing one full circuit in that immense span of time. The ancient Greeks were among the first to notice this. The astronomer Hipparchus, working in the 2nd century BC, compared star positions recorded by his predecessors with his own observations and noticed that they had shifted. He calculated a rate of precession that, remarkably, was close to the modern value. This was an extraordinary achievement, detecting a change that takes centuries to become apparent through nothing but patient observation and careful record keeping. What does this mean for the garden? It means that the sky is not quite the same sky it was for the ancient Egyptians who first watched Sirius announce the Nile flood. It means that the heliacal rising of Sirius, which in ancient Egypt around 3000 BC occurred in early July and coincided with the flooding season, now occurs in early August. The star has drifted relative to the season, following the slow precession of the sky. The constellations that were the signals for spring planting in Mesopotamia 5,000 years ago are no longer in quite the same position relative to the spring equinox. The knowledge accumulated over those early millennia had to be revised, adjusted, updated by later generations of sky watchers who noticed the drift and corrected for it. And in the Astronomer's Garden, there is a section at the far eastern edge where the oldest, most deeply rooted plants grow. These are not the most vigorous plants. They're the most patient ones, slow-growing, long-lived, their roots deeper than anything else in the garden. They were planted to mark positions in the sky that are almost imperceptibly shifting. In 100 years, they will be pruned back slightly, moved a hand's width to the east, following the drift. This section of the garden is tended differently from all the others. It is touched less frequently, watched more carefully. The astronomer comes here on clear nights simply to look at it in the starlight, to think about the long arc of time, to feel the smallness of a single human life relative to the vast cosmic patience of the sky. There is comfort in this, if you let yourself feel it. The sky has been doing this for longer than human civilization has existed. It will continue doing it when all our cities are dust, and there will still be seeds in the earth, and the earth will still be orbiting the sun, and the stars will still be turning slowly, steadily, magnificently overhead. By now you may have noticed something about this garden that makes it different from any garden you have seen in waking life. It is not only a place where plants grow, it is also a place from which the sky can be read. The shadow stone at the center marks the solstices and tracks the hour. The four directional trees mark the cardinal points: the equinox, sunrises and sets, the pole star. The rows, aligned east-west, function as sighting lines. If you stand at the western end of any row and look along in the pre-dawn darkness, you are looking due east, and you will see whatever star is rising in that direction with absolute precision. The Babylonians built their observations into their architecture. The great ziggurats, those step towers of ancient Mesopotamia, so massive that they could be seen from many miles away across the flat alluvial plain, were observatory platforms. From the top of a ziggurat, the horizon was broad and clear, and a trained astronomer could watch for the heliacal risings of stars and planets with the full, unobstructed sweep of the sky before them. The Egyptians aligned their temples with extraordinary precision. The Temple of Karnak, one of the most extensive religious complexes ever built, is aligned along its great avenue, so that on the winter solstice, the setting sun shines directly down the entire length of the main axis and illuminates the innermost sanctuary. This was not accidental. It required both astronomical knowledge and extraordinary skill in surveying and construction. The Maya built their observatories, the Caracol at Chichen Itza, for instance, with windows positioned to frame the risings and settings of Venus at key points in its cycle. The pyramid of Kukulkan at the same site was designed so that the spring and autumn equinoxes, the afternoon sun creates a shadow pattern on the staircase that makes it appear that a feathered serpent is descending from the pyramid's summit to the ground. This was deliberate, precise, and required both deep astronomical knowledge and extraordinary architectural skill. In every case, These great civilizations were doing what the astronomer's garden does in miniature, embedding their astronomical knowledge into the built environment, making the landscape itself a reading of the sky, so that anyone who moved through it was automatically in relationship with the cosmos. There is something deeply human about this impulse to build the sky into the earth. We cannot reach the stars, not with our hands, not with our feet, not in our lifetimes. But we can arrange stones, or plant trees, or dig channels, or grow rows of grain in ways that make the sky's movements visible in the landscape. We can make the earth into a mirror of the heavens, or at least into a map of our relationship with the heavens. And in doing so, we make the cosmos feel closer, more knowable, more intimate. The garden as observatory is not a metaphor. It is a literal description of what the astronomer's garden is. The shadow stone is a gnomon, the technical term for the part of a sundial that casts the shadow, and gnomons were among the most important astronomical instruments in the ancient world. The Greeks used large gnomons to measure the angle of the midday sun at different times of year, which allowed them to calculate the obliquity of the ecliptic, the tilt of the Earth's axis, with remarkable accuracy. Eratosthenes, the Greek geographer working in Alexandria around the 3rd century BC, famously used a gnomon and the knowledge that the sun was directly overhead in Syene at noon on the summer solstice to calculate the circumference of the entire Earth. He got it to within about 2% of the correct value, using nothing but a stick and a shadow. The shadow stone in the astronomer's garden is a humble version of this same instrument. But it is also a connection to that tradition of using the simplest possible tools, a stick, a shadow, a patient eye, to extract extraordinary knowledge from the daily movement of the sun. The most ancient of all these structures may be Göbekli Tepe in what is now southeastern Turkey. A complex of carved stone pillars, some of them several meters tall and weighing many tons, now believed by researchers to date back at least 12,000 years, to a time before what we usually call civilization began. Archaeologists are still working to understand its purpose, but the astronomical alignments built into its design suggest that even these extremely early people were organizing their relationship with the sky into physical form. We have been doing this for a very long time. The astronomer's garden is a humble version of this same impulse, to honor the conversation between earth and sky by building a place where that conversation can be heard most clearly. The night is very deep now. The astronomer is old. They have been tending this garden for more years than they can easily count, and before that they watched their own teacher tend it, learned its language slowly over the years of their apprenticeship, came to know each section of it the way you know the rooms of a house you have lived in for decades, not just with your eyes, but with your feet, your hands, the particular weight and smell and quality of light in each corner. They sit now on the low wall at the garden's edge, looking up. The sky is extraordinary tonight. No moon. It will not rise until near dawn. And the air is very clear, the kind of clarity that comes only on certain winter nights when the air mass has been swept clean by wind from the north, and every star is sharp as a pinprick of silver light. The Milky Way is visible as a broad, soft river overhead, brighter than usual, suggesting depths and distances that the imagination can barely hold. The astronomer has looked at this sky their entire life, and it still fills them with something that has no simple name. Not just wonder, though wonder is part of it. Not just humility, though that too. Something that feels more like recognition. The way you feel when you see a face you have loved for a long time in an unexpected place. A feeling of, there you are. And also, I am here. They know so many of these stars by name, by character, by what they mean for the garden. That bright blue-white, one low in the south, blazing so intensely it seems to pulsate, that is Sirius. The Nile star, the calendar's anchor, farther south, invisible tonight below the horizon, would be Canopus, the second brightest star in the sky, used by sailors of the ancient Mediterranean and the ancient Pacific alike as a guide. Over there, the Pleiades, small, soft, cluster like a handful of seed. They see them and think, it will be time to sow when you appear in the dawn sky. Everything in its time. And Orion, rising now in the east, his belt of 3 stars perfectly horizontal, his foot star Rigel blue-white and brilliant, his shoulder star Betelgeuse glowing warm orange-red, Orion, who the Egyptians saw as Osiris, who the ancient Greeks saw as a great hunter, who the people of the Lakota tradition saw as a hand. Different stories, the same stars, a single sky, read by 1,000 eyes across 1,000 generations. The astronomer thinks about what they will leave behind. The clay tablets, worn and densely inscribed, containing a lifetime of observations. The young person asleep inside, who has been learning for 5 years now, and who has the particular gift of patient, unhurried attention that this work requires above all else. And the garden itself, still growing, still breathing in the cool night air, its roots deep in the dark soil, its silver-leaved moon plants glowing faintly in the starlight. The knowledge will pass on. It is always passed on. Not perfectly. Things are always lost, forgotten, rediscovered, relearned, but essentially. The sky will still turn. The seasons will still come. Seeds will still respond to light and warmth. The relationship between the heavens and the earth is not something that can be broken by the passing of one person or one civilization. The great civilizations of antiquity passed on. Babylon, whose astronomers kept the most sophisticated sky records of the ancient world, was conquered and its culture absorbed into the Persian Empire, and then the Greek, and then the Parthian. But its astronomical knowledge did not disappear. Greek scholars encountered Babylonian astronomical traditions after Alexander's conquests in the 4th century BC, and they incorporated this data into their own developing mathematical models of the cosmos. Hipparchus, the Greek astronomer who discovered the precession of the equinoxes in the 2nd century BC, was working with Babylonian eclipse records that stretch back centuries before his birth. Ptolemy, whose mathematical synthesis of Greek astronomy became the standard reference work for more than 1,000 years, drew directly on this Babylonian inheritance. Egypt, whose priests watched Sirius for thousands of years, was eventually ruled by Greeks and then Romans, its old astronomical traditions blending with new ones. The Mayan astronomers who calculated the cycle of Venus to extraordinary precision and built pyramids that caught the equinox sun were disrupted by conquest, their books burned, their knowledge scattered. Though much of it survived, encoded in the stones of their temples and in the living traditions of their descendants, who continue to observe these cycles today. The work is never finished. The garden is never complete. It is always in process, always responding to the sky, always being learned and relearned. The astronomer closes their eyes. The cold night air moves across their face. Somewhere in the garden, a night-blooming flower opens in the dark, releasing its fragrance to no one and everyone. A moth follows the scent and finds the flower and does its quiet work. The stars continue their slow turning. Here is a thing that is true and also beautiful. You're not as far from this garden as you might think. Every time a farmer checks the almanac for the best planting dates, they're following a practice that stretches back to ancient Babylon. Every time someone plants their tomatoes after the last frost date, calculated from the position of the sun and the accumulated statistical knowledge of many generations, they're using an astronomical calendar. Every time a market opens at a particular season, offering the particular produce of that particular moment in the year, it is following a rhythm established by the sky. The seasons themselves, spring, summer, autumn, winter, are astronomical phenomena. They are caused by the tilt of the Earth's axis relative to its orbit around the sun, which means that different parts of the Earth receive different amounts of sunlight at different times of year. The solstices and equinoxes that the ancient builders of Stonehenge marked with such care that the Babylonian astronomers recorded in their clay tablets, that the Egyptians aligned their temples to, these are real, physical, celestial events. They are happening right now. As you listen to this story, the sky is still turning. The year is still cycling. Think about the word season. It comes from the Latin seitio, the act of sowing, of planting. The seasons were named after farming, or farming was named after the seasons, or they grew up together so entangled that you cannot separate them. The very language we use to talk about the year carries within it the ancient conversation between the sky and the soil. Think about the words we still use. Harvest moon, dog days, equinox, solstice. Harvest moon, the full moon that gives farmers extra evening light at the busiest time of year. Dog days, the hottest days of summer, named for the position of Sirius, the dog star, which rose with the sun during the hottest weeks in ancient Rome, so that people believed the combined heat of the sun and the star together was responsible for the miserable heat. This turns out not to be accurate, but the name has lasted 2,000 years. Equinox, from the Latin for equal night, the 2 days each year when day and night are exactly equal in length. Solstice, from the Latin for sun standing still, the 2 days when the sun's rising and setting points stop moving north or south and briefly pause before reversing. These words are sky knowledge, encoded in everyday language, passed down from the ancient astronomers to us without most of us realizing we are carrying something so old. Modern agriculture has, in many ways, moved indoors and underground, into greenhouses and storage facilities and artificial light cycles that can simulate any season at any time of year. We have achieved an extraordinary freedom from the ancient constraints of climate and season. We can eat strawberries in December and root vegetables in June if we choose. But the sky has not stopped being the calendar. It has not stopped matching. The farmers who grow the food you eat are still tracking the seasons, still watching the weather, still responding to the rhythms of sunlight and temperature that determine what will grow and when. The great agricultural regions of the world still depend on the monsoons, on the mountain snows that melt and feed the rivers, on the summer solstice heat that ripens the grain, on all the same phenomena that the ancient sky watchers were observing, recording, and living by. And something deeper than agriculture still connects us to that ancient practice of looking up, the desire to find pattern in the sky, to see the Pleiades not just as a random scattering of stars, but as a sign, a signal, a story. This desire is part of what makes us human. We are pattern-seeking creatures. We are meaning-making creatures. We look at the sky and we want to know what it is saying, what it knows, what it sees from up there that we cannot see from down here. The astronomer in the garden understood this. The priests in their Babylonian ziggurats understood it. The builders of Stonehenge, who hauled stones weighing 20 tons across miles of open downland in order to build a monument that would catch the light of the solstice sunrise in a particular way. They understood it with a passion that built mountains of rock. And the Maya understood it perhaps most completely of all. They built cities whose temples were astronomical instruments. They calculated the synodic period of Venus, the time it takes Venus to return to the same position relative to the Sun, as 583 days, which is extraordinarily close to the modern calculated value. They tracked eclipses centuries into the future using the eclipse tables in the Dresden Codex, one of only 4 surviving pre-Columbian Maya books. They built the Pyramid of Kukulkan so that at the equinoxes, the shadows of its terraces create the illusion of a serpent descending the staircase. Every year, thousands of people still come to stand in the shadow of this pyramid on the equinox morning and watch the ancient light show that the Maya architects designed into its geometry. The sky, spoken in stone, still speaking. We are standing in their garden, still. Every time you look up on a clear night and feel something large and quiet and inexplicable, you're feeling the same thing they felt. The sky has not changed. The stars are the same stars. The Pleiades are still the Pleiades. Orion still rises in the east on winter nights. Sirius is still the brightest star in the sky, still blazing above all others, still the same cold fire it was when. Egyptian priests watch for it on the Nile at dawn. The conversation between earth and sky is still going on, and somewhere always there's a garden where that conversation is being listened to with care. Let the image of the garden settle now in your mind. Those long, quiet rows, the silver-leaved moon plants glowing softly in the starlight, the shadow stone at the center resting in the dark, the 4 great trees at the 4 corners of the world standing in the deep hush of night. The astronomer is there still, or someone very like them, moving between the rows in the pre-dawn stillness, reading the sky, tending the earth, listening to the conversation that has been going on since the first seed was put in the ground, and the first I looked up to see whether the Pleiades had risen yet. The stars are turning. The seasons are cycling. Somewhere the new wheat is pushing up through cold soil toward a warming sun. Somewhere the first almond blossoms are opening in faith that spring is coming. The garden waits for tomorrow's dawn. And so, in the kindest and most patient way, do the stars. Rest now. Let the night settle around you like the cool garden air, like the darkness between the stars. There is nothing more you need to do tonight. The sky will keep turning without your help. And in the morning, the sun will rise exactly where it always rises at this time of year. And the earth will continue its patient, beautiful orbit. And the garden will still be growing in the dark. Sleep well. And if you enjoyed this story tonight, please do take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps more people find their way here to these quiet stories, and it means the world to the people who make them. Every like and every subscribe is a small act of kindness that brings a little more peace into someone's night. Until next time, good night. The stars are watching over you.